I'm James Crepea, and he's Aaron Fentress, and this is Ducks Confidential. With fall camp underway and some real football practices and performances to assess, we're going to take an early look into the season and give some insights from the first 10 days of fall camp for the Ducks, giving an outlook a little bit early on. We'll get into a full season preview in an upcoming episode as we get a little bit closer to the season. But with the season about 2.5 weeks away from starting, obviously lots of excitement. Starts with the preseason polls. They're out. The Ducks coming in at number 11 in the preseason AP poll, 12 in the preseason coaches poll. What do you think, Aaron? It's legit, not legit, good position for where they should be. Your assessment?
I think it's about right. I think, that's pretty much where I thought they would probably land, somewhere in that 10 to 15 range. They ended this season poorly last year, but I think everyone in the country knows they have a ton of talent because their recruiting classes have been extremely strong. So you would expect that they're going to replace a lot of the guys that they lost from last year and guys who they didn't have last year because of the staggered season starting late, losing Panay and Holland and guys like that. So I think that's fair. I think, the big question is quarterback clearly and revamping the defense a bit, but as you'll get to later, they have a ton of talent on defense. I think everyone knows that. So I think it's a fair start for them.
Yeah, I agree. I think that ultimately, I didn't think that they were certainly not going to start any higher than 9th. I think for any Oregon fans who are going to make the case that they're underranked at 11 or 12, basically who in the top 10, which there was the same 10 teams for both the coaches and the AP poll voters, who were they supposed to be ahead of? I mean, there were some voters clearly who did have them in the top 10, but if you were going to make a case, who were they to be ahead of in that group? Now, you could say, well, I'm not real high on Cincinnati. They should be ahead of Cincinnati. Or certainly, again, the AP poll voters had them ahead of Florida. The coaches had them one spot behind Florida. There are a couple of arguments to be had, but not that many, especially where Oregon is the highest ranked team among teams who finished last season unranked. And now I understand why they finished unranked. It was a short season. Yes, they ended up at 4-3, but they still played a New Year's Six game. They won a Pac-12 conference that had no integrity of record in the season last season. But nevertheless, they won a power conference league. They do have a lot of pieces back. Yes, they have changes on offense.
They won a power conference league.
Well, Aaron wants to take away the trophies.
I don't want to take away the trophy. I don't want to take it away.
He wants to make sure that nobody flies any banners, whether that's Washington flying a North Division banner or USC flying a South Division banner or Oregon flying a Pac-12 conference banner. But be that as it may, again, they've got the trophies and the rings to show for it. Just ask them. But ultimately, again, the whole conference had no integrity of record last year. We know that. And that's everybody. That's everybody. Right. The South Division didn't have integrity of record. Colorado didn't get its shot against USC. So it was a mess. But they won the league. And with that said, yes, they end up at 4-3, but they didn't play. Nobody in the league played a full season. Half the league played 4 games last year. It was a mess. Having said all that, when you have what they have returning, when you have the caliber of talent that they have and the caliber of coaching that they have, you knew that they were going to start the year ranked. I agree with you. I thought personally that they'd be somewhere between 10 and 15. I thought the absolute lowest that anybody could really justify would have been 16 or 17. If you really bent over backwards to say make a case for every which other team. But you start getting into the teams like 17 to 25 in these polls, it's a total roll of the dice. There's so many teams down there. In the AP poll, you're talking about Utah and Arizona State. Can you really make a case that Utah or Arizona State deserve to start the season ahead of Oregon? No, you can't. You could look through the biggest fan glasses of a Utah fan or Arizona State fan. You would not be able to make that case at this point. So, having said that, I think that they ended up basically where they were supposed to in the preseason polls. And look, having said that, they play a big game in week 2. We know that against Ohio State, who's in the top 5. The top 5 teams were the same in both polls. And Clemson and Georgia play in week 1. And Alabama plays Miami in week 1. So there are going to be a lot of top 25 games in non-conference play. Oregon's got one of them. Washington, I know Michigan's technically unranked, but they're just outside the top 25. So there are going to be some big games for Pac-12 teams. They're going to be obviously a very big game for Oregon in non-conference play. And then we'll see how conference play unfurls. But I thought the Pac-12 as a whole in both the coaches and AP polls entirely was treated pretty well, treated fairly for a league that had the fewest games. And like we talked about, had no integrity of record as a conference. I thought that the league as a whole, that USC being ranked not too far behind Oregon, that Washington being ranked 20 or 21, and then, yes, Utah and Arizona State in the AP poll, not in the coaches poll, but just outside. I thought that was all fair. I thought as a whole, you really can't ask for more.
Is there anything more worthless than the preseason college football poll anyway? I mean, I voted in the AP before. I assume you voted before. I don't know. Do you vote now?
I vote in the men's basketball poll.
Men's basketball poll. So, I mean, preseason polls, I remember going over all the, who's back for each team and looking at all this, blah, blah, blah. And I think it was the last time I did it was a year Brady Quinn was going to be a senior with Notre Dame. And I had them ranked number one. And people are like, you only have them number one because they have Brady Quinn. I'm like, well, no, they returned like 15 starters. And plus, it's a preseason poll. I don't know. Like, I'm not going to pretend to know who's the best team in the country coming into a season. It's just guesswork. It's basically
to a degree, but since 2004, the national champion has been ranked in the top 7 all but twice in the preseason poll.
But those teams have been fairly obvious, right? Alabama's won how many of those titles? Clemson's won a couple.
Sure.
Sure. So I'm talking about top 25, not just the top 3 or 4. Yeah, you can probably.
Yeah, but ultimately, like you say, is there anything more worthless? And I say, well, I don't know. For the last 16, 17 years, ended up in the top 7 is basically indicative that you're going to win the whole thing, unless you were 2010 Auburn, where they had Cam Newton as a transfer, or 2013 Florida State, who was number 11. I mean, yeah, they were really, really outside the grid. I mean, so bottom line, I agree with you. Do they carry a lot of weight? Can you remember? Well, forget about last year. All right, that gets really messy. But other than basically guessing that Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma would be in the top 5 on a habitual basis the last several years, can you really unequivocally say who was the top 5 2 years ago, or even last year, or who? No, not really, not really. It doesn't carry. I mean, it doesn't carry lasting weight. It shouldn't. Insofar as, hey, the games still have to be played. Like we just rattled off, all these games are going to be top 25, top 10 kind of games to start. It's going to shift quickly, and good. That's the fun. I'd rather have a bunch of top 15 matchups to talk about the first couple of weeks than have none of them. And then you go, well, no, we really aren't going to know until November or December. No, we're going to know pretty quick among the top 10 teams how some of these teams are. When, like I say, when Georgia and Clemson are playing each other right out the chute, and Clemson's schedule from there is basically a cakewalk. And Georgia has only 1 or 2 games that are really supposed to be terribly competitive. So, and again, we're mentioning a couple teams around the country because of the preseason polls, but these are games that are going to matter to Oregon. These are games that are going to matter to the Pac-12, no matter what Oregon does against Ohio State in week 2. If they win, they certainly vault themselves up into that conversation in a hurry, which brings us to our second question on this general topic, Aaron. On the possibility of contending for a playoff berth, since we are talking about preseason discussions here, and a team that starts off 11 or 12 in preseason polls, highest in the Pac-12, 2-time reigning champions of the Pac-12. If you're going to be a playoff team, you have to win a Power 5 league. That's pretty much proven and unequivocal at this point. So do you think at this point, entering the season, where do you handicap Oregon's chances of being a playoff contender? Not a champion contender. Talking about getting in the field of 4. Getting in the field of 4.
Well, I agree with your assessment. I mean, you picked them to win the Pac-12. You pretty much say you don't see how they're not going to win the Pac-12. So then from that point, they have to be 12-1 at worst. 12-1 has gotten the Pac-12 into the playoffs each time so far. So I would definitely give them a chance to be a Pac-12 representative in the playoffs if they are 12-1. With the Ohio State game, if they beat Ohio State, I give them a chance. I just don't think that's going to happen. If they lose Ohio State, that means they have to run the table. They've only run the table once in the history of the program. I don't think this is a team capable of necessarily running the table unless the Pac-12 is completely down, which maybe it is. Who knows? But so I'm going to say no. I don't think this is a playoff team. And my biggest concern is going to be the defense, given the fall off last year, and then the question at quarterback. They're starting a 6th-year senior transfer. We'll see if he's championship capable or not, but I don't believe he's national championship contention capable.
And time is going to tell on all that. And yes, do I believe that they're going to win the division and win the conference? Yeah, I was one of the people who voted in the Pac-12 media preseason poll, and I voted for Oregon to win the North and for them to win the league and for USC to win the South. So to go rather chalk in that sense. However, are they the only team that faces some of the questions that you're referring to? No. We talk about the teams in the top 10. There are most of the teams in the top 10. Most of the teams, other than North Carolina, Oklahoma, who don't return starting quarterbacks.
It's true.
So you could say, well, there's questions at quarterback. Yeah, there are. Or else there are questions at quarterback. Now, again, it's not exactly because Alabama and Clemson have top-end recruits as well.
Exactly.
But point is they've got changes at quarterback. Ohio State is changing at quarterback. First time in 60, almost 70 years that they have never had a quarterback returning who attempted a pass in their career. Now, you could say, well, yeah, but C.J. Stroud was a 5-star guy, and they got another 5-star guy and another 4-star guy, and now a reclassifying 5-star guy. How bad could it be? I hear you. But there's still uncertainty out there elsewhere in the country. So to not make a mountain out of a molehill, bottom line, do I think Oregon is going to win the Pac-12? Yes. Do I think that puts them in the playoff conversation by default? Yeah. Can I say
12-1?
Oh, for sure. No, the 12-1, it's beyond conversation. But 12-1, you're absolutely in the top 5 or 6, and you're in the thick of the conversation. I say you're in the conversation if you win the league. Just in that, in conversation, I'm not talking about conversation 4 versus 5 versus 6 in the actual trio of teams. Yes, that's a given at 12-1. I'm saying you're in the conversation if you're in the top 10, if you're in the top 8, and later in the season. If you win a Power 5 league, you should be probably in the top 10 teams. You would need, how many other, 2-3 SEC teams over and above a champion plus, a team like a Cincinnati or a group of 5 team to sneak in there. Yes, obviously Cincinnati's done that, but point is do I know for sure, what the season's going to unfurl and what entails for everybody else? No, I don't know that either. I think they're going to be in the conversation, but you're right. The Ohio State game, look, if they win that, they clearly will vault into the converation in a hurry. They'll be there all season long. But we're taking a mid-August review of things. I say that, I personally believe that they'll win the league again, and in that case, they'll be in the conversation. Do I think that they are more likely than not to be in the playoff? No, I can't say that. The odds right now are paying you better than 2-1 for them not to make the playoff and not be one of those 4 teams. Yeah, I mean, we got the odds email earlier this morning, but if you wanted to bet on that right now, if you feel Oregon's going to make the playoff, it's 13-2, which is a plus 650. You get 6.5 to 1 odds on yes, and it would be minus 1,200, 1-12 odds to not be among the top 4 teams. So, as I say,
12 to 1. I thought you said 2-1. Okay. 12.
Well, I'm saying you're getting better than 2-1 is what I was saying on the return. In this case, you're getting 6.5 to 1 if you believe that they're going to be among the teams in the top 4 today, as of today. Now,
I'd have a tough time touching that myself. So let's get to what needs to happen for them to make a magical run. For me, the biggest concern, as I mentioned, the defense. Now, you've made the point. Last year, you have to take it with a grain of salt. Last year was a weird season. They lost some key guys because of COVID, et cetera, et cetera. The run up to the season was weird. Do you judge them or not? The bottom line is they gave up 31 points per game, whereas the previous year they gave up, I think, 16. That's a huge difference regardless of what went down. They got a new defensive coordinator. Do you believe this defense can get back to the 20 points allowed per game or less type of area, which is where I think they probably need to be to have a chance to run the table?
I think they can get back to be, whether it's 20 points or it's a slightly different number, I think they can get back to being a really competitive and top-end defense in the league. And whether that's a top 30 defense nationally, top 25 defense nationally, I think it's all relative. I don't think it has to necessarily be a hard number on points or hard number on yards. I think it ultimately comes down to where do you stack up, relatively speaking. If they're in the top 30 nationally defensively, and I think they absolutely have the talent to do it, there's no question, then yeah, I think they can do that. I think they can reach top 30. Can they reach top 25? And we're talking about an overall and scoring defense when I say 25. I don't know if it's going to be top 25 in every statistical category. But can they make certain improvements in terms of run defense in particular that will then improve their total defense, improve their scoring defense? Yeah, I think so. Right. I think so. And I think they're physically capable of it. I think they have the talent to do it. And yes, they're obviously changing defensive coordinators and have Tim DeRuyter and bringing his scheme to the table. But when you have three guys in the front seven who are former 5-star recruits and plenty of other 4-stars in that group, yeah, that's a lot of talent to work with. That's a lot of pieces. And a really talented secondary too, to be clear. But point is when you have that kind of firepower to throw out there aren't too many other teams in the Pac-12 who can really stack up with that. There just aren't.
Where do you think the big changes are going to be that's going to help them turn the corner? And interior defensive line, is that one of the areas you talked
That's
about?
one. Yeah, that's one in particular. I know they lose a couple of seniors, but Jordan Scott and Austin Falliou did not have particularly productive senior seasons last season. I know for myriad reasons, short year, screwy year. Yes.
Right.
It's not a matter of rehashing everything from last year. Their production was not there. They were undrafted free agents in the NFL. Now they're being replaced by the guys who were serving as their understudies, as their backups last year, with Popo Amavai and Brandon Dorless, who really took over as a starter by the end of last year anyway. And then a Christian Williams and Keon Ware-Hudson, who were 5th and 6th on the interior of the defensive line a year ago, will now be 3rd and 4th of the interior this year. That, to me, as a whole, I think this group of the top 4 will be collectively better and get better production than last year's top 4,
right?
I believe. And then, again, having a Justin Flo at weak side linebacker, where, yes, they have to replace Isaac Slade Matatia, who went to SMU in the offseason, and his production was really important, and he was really good in pass coverage for an inside linebacker. But you're replacing him with a 5-star. That's big. And Keith Brown, who arrives in the offseason in the spring, yes, he's a true freshman. No, you're not going to ask him to go out there and play 35 snaps a game, but he's another 5-star. So it's just a matter of reloading the talent with top-end talent and the depth chart with top-end talent. They're doing that. They're doing that at a lot of positions. So in the particular areas, in terms of, they're replacing 3 guys in their front 7. Yeah, they are. But I think it may actually end up being a net positive for them just because of the caliber, like I said, the caliber of talent that they've brought in and added in some of those spots.
What about scheme-wise? What do you think people can expect differently from what we saw from Avalos?
So, we chatted about this a little bit last night, and I don't want to
succinctly.
I want to keep it pretty basic because it starts getting really into the weeds. But to keep it kind of to the point, the bottom line is to the untrained eye, it's not going to necessarily look all that different. There will be some differences. You'll notice on the edges, you'll see that Kayvon Thibodeaux plays out of a 2-point stance. Did he do that at times last year? Yeah. Did he play probably more out of a 3-point? Yeah. Is there a huge difference in that? Not necessarily. Depends. But ultimately, this whole thing this offseason, going back to the spring when he said, well, he changed positions, he's on the edge, and then it's not exactly, the responsibilities are basically unchanged. He's still going to be a pass rusher. Yeah, he is. That's irrefutable. But there are differences in nuance of technique between what he was doing before predominantly and what he'll be doing now predominantly. Wild differences? No. But differences. Differences in certain kinds of responsibilities. Differences in how he goes about attacking. Differences in what path he takes to attacking the quarterback. They're really fine points, to be clear. But he won't be the only one that sees some changes in that regard. So I think as a whole, there will be some schematic changes, some that really, like I say, get into the weeds, whether we're talking about the edge players, Kayvon Thibodeaux being obviously the most prominent, but Mace Funa also on the other edge, or Braden Swinson, who can play either with his hand in the dirt or off the edge as well. Adrian Jackson also lined up behind KT. So those guys, you'll see some differences. In the secondary, I think it's going to look very, 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 very similar to what people saw before. I mean, ultimately, there's only so many variations of man and zone and personnel of how many, guys you're throwing out there, 4 and 5 and et cetera. So with base, with nickel becoming the base for basically everybody, I think that's going to look largely the same. But there will be some differences in the front 7. And like I say, against teams in the Pac-12 North who play with multiple tight ends a lot, there things are really going to look quite similar to what Andy Avalos was doing, because when you're playing multiple tight ends, you have to be in a more traditional defense. That will be a more traditional 3-4 or 4-3 for that matter, or occasionally 5-2 if need be. That's And that's not tipping off anything from what we've seen at practice. That's just generic. That's just football. That's just that's just basic. So bottom line, I do think there will be some adjustments that come in, but yeah, I mean, some of it will be really into the weeds, and some of it will be pretty plain and easy to see.
Speaking of Kayvon, easily one of the most hyped players in the history of Oregon coming into a season. People have him projected top 5 pick. They're calling him top 5 or 10 player in the country, obviously. 3 sacks last year, again, 7 games, weird season. I thought honestly he might get 8 or 10 sacks just in those 7 games based on how he ended his freshman season. Given, I wouldn't say pressure, but given the expectations for him, given how they plan to use him this season, do you expect him, A, to be Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year, at least in the running, B, to surpass 10 sacks, and maybe C, set the sack record, which is 13?
Yeah, yes to all those.
Yes, to all the above.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a player who's in contention for Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. I absolutely believe that. I'm certainly not going to put a cap on his production or capabilities. I'm not going to be that one to do. I mean, I would not be somebody to in any way put a limit on what that young man is capable of. He is capable of a ton. He is a physical force and presence. Has been and will continue to be, and is still really just scraped the surface of his potential. So with a full season and the ability to go up against, not for nothing, Pac-12 doesn't have that many great offensive tackles this year. It doesn't. The best offensive tackles he's going to play are against Ohio State. So, and they're 2 of the best in the country. And if they keep one of them at tackle and not move him inside in particular. So, I think he's, how much he's double teamed will have a lot to do with it. I think that may change a little bit again this year compared to last year. Also, I think he even talks about, if I was an offensive coordinator, I would double team me on every play, until somebody stops you. So ultimately, do I think that he's going to be in the running for that conversation for Defensive Player of the Year in the conference? Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, you'd be a fool to suggest otherwise. He was the only unanimous selection for a preseason all-conference team. So he has the name recognition, he has the brand, he has the production to back it all up. He was the obviously the championship game MVP from a year ago. So yeah, I mean, he's got the resume already. And if he goes out there and in terms of the sack record for the program being 13, I mean, he's shooting a heck of a lot higher than that. Like I say,
is he?
Yeah, oh yeah.
What's he shooting for?
He wants 20 plus. Now, of course, you could say, well, that's crazy. That's whatever. We're talking about NCAA records, Well, of course, because who's done it? It's only been done a handful of times in college football history.
And I don't think teams are going to allow him to do it. I don't think a team is going to not do everything they can to keep him from getting 3 or 4 sacks in the game.
Don't disagree, but
very difficult to get 20. But
it's been done.
To have a goal.
It's been done before in terms of college football history, and for one, and two, like the other side of it is he should be shooting for the seemingly limitless. He's not somebody who should go in and say, I only want like 8 or 9. No, he should be shooting for the moon. I mean, why? Basically, why stop there? Why put any limit? I mean, basically, he should be striving for every which thing. He's talked about. He's been frank about it. He's going, I want to be in the Heisman Trophy conversation. Now, of course, we know defensively that's not realistic for a defensive player to do it. Hasn't been done, and it would be awfully difficult to accomplish that. But would you be the one to tell him he can't do it? I ain't. No. Because I'll be honest, historically speaking, I thought Tyrann Mathieu and Ndamukong Suh should have won it the years that they were each up for it. So I'm not somebody who says a defensive player can never do it. I'm somebody who thought that
should be involved.
Those guys could have, would have, should have won it the years they were up for it.
I would say half of the quarterbacks that have won Heisman, if not more than half, were nowhere near the best players in the country when you factor in all positions. And a lot of them weren't even the best players on their team. They just played quarterback. So Heisman to me is weak in that regard. But another point about Kayvon, if teams do decide, okay, we're going to ice Kayvon, we're not going to let him have any shot at getting to the quarterback unless he can go through 2 guys. How do you feel about the rest of the defense taking advantage of that and racking up a bunch of sacks team-wise, even if he doesn't get a ton? Let's say he only gets 7 or 8, which I say only, that's still a lot. But if he gets only seven, being double teamed all season, can the rest of the team produce 30, 25, whatever?
30 would be really, really high. I mean, 30 would be a ton. 30 would be a really high number.
UCLA had 23 last year in 7 games.
Yeah, but if you're talking 30 plus him getting 7 or 8, you're talking 37, 38. Yeah. That's
in
almost
14 games. They had 46.
That's
in 14 games,
it's basically I say that's basically three per game. That's a pretty decent clip.
That's what
It's
UCLA did.
Not impossible. Not
That's
impossible.
what UCLA did. I'm just saying. Anyway, do you think the rest of the guys
had and UCLA had a interior defensive tackle who got drafted?
We just talked about all the 5 stars. So anyway, but the point is, do you think the rest of the team are there a bunch of pass rushers that are going to make people pay for spending too much time worrying about Kayvon? In your estimation?
I believe that they have, particularly on the edge, a pretty good assortment of guys. Some of whom I mentioned before, Adrian Jackson Jr., one of them, Mace Funa, one of them, and a couple of guys on the interior who can help balance it out. And like I say, it's 37 or 38 on a 13-game season. We're not even including necessarily 14, maybe even 15, getting to that level. It's certainly possible. Again, they had 41 2 years ago in a 14-game season. But we're talking about in a 12 or 13-game sample. Is 37 or 38 possible with one guy having that number? Yeah, I mean, they did it in 2019. It's not impossible by any stretch of the imagination. It could be better than that. But that was also a pretty good clip that they were at back in 2019, too. Not otherworldly, not record-setting. It was good. Can they do it? Yeah, I think they can absolutely have that kind of a number. And I think they have the talent to support it with more than just KT. But, that said, to your point, yeah, they're going to be opposing offensive coordinators who make it their mission every week to ensure that he does not have the success that he's looking for and that Oregon does not get the disruption that it's looking to achieve either from him or freeing up other guys to do damage in lieu of him. So it will be a test, to be sure.
Secondary-wise, last year Graham didn't play. Javon didn't play. Diamador came in late and decided to play. But there seemed obviously, so you would expect there to be a drop off in the secondary play, and there kind of was, losing 2 NFL guys. Do you think they can get back to those 2 numbers?
Three when you include Breeze. Breeze got drafted too.
Oh, that's right. Breeze didn't play. I'll say so 3 guys. So do you expect there to be an uptick back to almost where they were in 19, or do you think there's a ways to go before they can reach those levels? Given all the talent that they've,
I think it's right now they have talent. They have a lot of talent. I think the question now at the secondary is just because of these 2 indefinite suspensions right now that there's just a lot of moving pieces. I mean, we saw this first scrimmage this past Saturday. The secondary was down or limited or whatever. The bottom line, there were 6 players in the secondary who didn't play for one reason or another. Now, it's not all injury. It's not all suspension. It's a combination of all these things. But bottom line, 6 guys. That's a full unit. It's not all the guys on the first unit, all the guys on the second unit, but it's 6 guys. Well, there's only so many. How many defensive backs do you think are on the team? I mean, there's not 30 of them. Right. So you take 6 guys out of the mix. That's a lot. So in terms of starting to project out right now of that kind of talent, is Michael Wright a future NFL player? Absolutely. Is Dante Manning probably, and I say probably only because we haven't actually seen him. If you go by recruiting profile, he certainly has the makeup to do it, but we haven't seen it in a game yet. So you'd be a fool to start proclaiming guys before they even play at the college level. Verone McKinley's played a lot of college football. Bennett Williams and Jordan Happel played a lot of college football. And Jamal Hill closed the year well last year, but again, he's one of the guys indefinitely suspended right now. So there's just a lot of moving parts. Do I think that they have the talent, not just on the top line, but including on the second line on the depth chart, to certainly be as good as they were a couple of years ago? Yeah, I do. I think collectively they have a lot of talent. That said, do I think that, when you're talking about replacing, whether it was Javon or Graham or Diamador or Breeze, yeah, it's a lot to replace. They knew they were going to have a lot to replace in that group. Right. And I think individually today, again, before we get into a season and who does what in the next additional year, of the entire group, the guys here now, and you can look at some of the guys who were here before, yeah, I think Javon Holland was the most talented, physically talented and gifted of the guys who were here before and no longer here and the guys who are here now. But he was a borderline, he's an early second-round pick, borderline first-round pick. That's not speaking low of anybody.
Right.
That's, at deep safety, that's not a position of tremendous high-end value in the NFL to be a borderline first-round pick when you opt out, no less. That just speaks really highly of Javon Holland.
Absolutely. One thing we skipped past that I want to talk about is the future of the QB position. So Brown is the starter for now. Unless he plays poorly, he will be the starter. But there's a lot of good young players, 4- and 5-star recruits behind him. Who do you see being the backup? Do you think they'll settle on a backup, or do you think it'll be backup by committee if needed? And who do you think is the front runner to be the starter in 2022 if there is one? And who do you think is going to transfer first? Did I lose you? Damn it. Am I still on, but he isn't?